Host of Mars Talks, as always. And, today with me is Christoffer Herheim, who's a co-founder and CEO of Optio, a startup bringing together a know-how and software to remove legal and practical obstacles and create the environment where equity-based compensation is available for every startup. Christoffer, welcome to Mars Talks, and could you please tell us a bit about your background?
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, great to be here. Super excited. My name is Christoffer. I'm the CEO and, as you mentioned, one of the co-founders of Optio. My background before that was, after finalizing my finance education, I jumped straight into a Norwegian startup that did equity compensation valuations. So we kind of specialized in the difficult stuff on making a publicly listed company that used equity compliance. So it's a bit like the boring stuff, but still the important stuff.
Right.
The company I worked with then, we grew quite fast. I was not one of the founders, but very early in. And we sold the company in 2015 to a private equity company from UK. And they also acquired UBS, their share admin part. So it was something that was kind of merged together with us. So that was kind of UBS's stuff that did something similar to us, but we did the accounting. They had the front end and the stuff that kind of interacted with the employees, which was cool. We kind of wanted that. But after the transaction, it was, what shall I say? I didn't like it so much. So I left a year after the transaction, and then I worked a bit as a consultant in order to try to find out. Like, I helped a lot of companies on what equity incentive programs work, how much should we give away, how should we communicate it, how much do CEO get versus CFOs, and I kind of help boards and owners to kind of launch it and communicate it. After doing that for a while, we saw that what I did as a consultant and the old stuff that we used to do in the old company could be combined into something which kind of simplified equity compensation when it comes to, again, what should we do? How should we use it? How should we communicate it? Making the employees feel it, make it more tangible, but also do the accounting and valuation so that companies are compliant. So we started in 2018 early with coding, and fast forward, now we're here. We have offices in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, soon starting up in France and in Netherlands as well. So it's been fun, definitely. Yeah.
You're growing fairly fast then, 4 years, 4 different countries. That's pretty amazing. So your background ultimately, shaped the way that you started Optio, right? Who did you start it with? What's your story with your co-founders?
Yeah. The story with the co-founders is that I think it's very important. First of all, important to if you're able to be more than one founder, I think it's great because you get like different mindsets and experience into the same boat with the same incentives and working close together. So the way we did it was that Mats, one of my co-founders, was more of a commercial person. So I met him in the old company that I used to work with before, the one that got sold. So we decided to start off again after a while, after I've been working a bit as a consultant. So he was kind of great to have on board. Obviously, none of us knew coding, so we needed a techie as well. That's a bit strange because it's like we moved into an office because we did a bit in this consultancy world when we did a bit of that, and then a company that was just bankrupt. They were going out. We met them in the door, kind of high five. I get the keys. One of those guys were Alexander. He became the CTO and co-founder because we chatted a bit and we needed a co-founder. So he basically just we got the furnitures in Alexander with the new office in a way. So he was the CTO, and then we had Magnus, more of an administrational person. And we also had a guy named Fredrik that worked as an intern together with us on the consultancy parts. And that kind of formed a diverse and a quite broad founding team, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, congrats on the CDO. That was a good deal on the office, definitely. Uh, but yeah, so what obviously the biggest question here, right, is what is the main advantage of using equity-based compensation for a startup? And have you started with the 5 co-founders, or I guess 4 co-founders and the first hire, right? Did you offer it right away, or you had to figure it out on the go?
I think it's a good question, and it's not always the way, like, kind of this is the answer for everyone. So I think it's important to know, okay, how much cash do you have? What sort of talents are you attracting? What sort of businesses are you in? And so, but I think it's important to kind of have a toolbox of various compensation components and knowing what to use when.
Right.
The way we started, definitely dog fooding. So we have done equity incentives for everyone after the founding team. Obviously, the founding team had shares. What we believe is that it's important to ensure that people that come on board have as much as the same mentality as the founders as possible for as long time as possible. And with that, I mean that feeling the ownership, because obviously in the startup journey, things get difficult every now and then. You have to work a bit harder. You have to sit up at night. It is kind of rough. And if then everyone is partly invested in it, and you could feel that you're a bit more in it together. So I think in my opinion, I think that cash and bonus is nice to have. You have to pay your bills and making sure that you have enough so you don't have to have to feel insecure.
Right.
But after that, I think it's like, if you can put some call it like carrots in the future. So if we manage to do this, we all get this and this and this, then you're so much more aligned. And obviously people get offers from other companies. You will get 10,000 euros more a year here. If you have invested stocks or invested options or whatever that has some value, it kind of vaccinates for that. So you won't leave just because that you get like 10,000 more. So obviously that's not necessarily why you want them to stay, because you want them to have fun and to like that. But I think it takes away that element. So that there's many reasons of doing it, but I think starting off a bit, like if you have a lot of money and if you kind of want to keep the shares on your own and you think it's not strategically right and people are not motivated by it, it's not the right tool. But I'd say that in most of the cases, people will be motivated and will work well together. Then it's more like, what sort of instruments do we use in which stage again?
Right. Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, that, salary and bonuses are still very important, no matter how much equity you get, you kind of pay your bills with it, right? But in a circumstance when we have early stage founders, maybe it's their first business, not too much money involved, right? How do I go with my co-founder, and we're pre-product, pre-revenue? How do we share equity, and how do we offer equity? How do we measure equity? I guess this is a very big issue for a lot of especially first-time founders.
Yeah, and this is also a bit different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because obviously there are some jurisdictions where you have some tax favorable plans that, and if you kind of qualify for them, most likely it's a no-brainer to kind of do it like that. But I think first of all, you need to start with what's the intention of having it, because sometimes we see someone that tax tailors it so much that you end up losing the reason of why you're having it. I think like starting off with like, okay, do you want to retain people? Is that the most important part? Is it to motivate? Is it to compensate for a cash loss because of you recruited someone from a big company with a higher salary? Have that in mind. And then you start off with, okay, how do you do it? And then it's like, there's tons of ways of valuating these packages. You could say you do a fair value assessment based on financial theory. That's not the best when you think about startups. Then I think it's more like, you have to make some scenarios on what sort of development you think that the company can have. Obviously, everyone makes the hockey stick, but I think it's important to have like a bit different scenarios. And in that, you find out that risk-adjusted likely gains, if things go okay, it can be worth this. And then you just need to find out, okay, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, this is the gains that these persons will get out of it. And you need to communicate it, and you need to resonate on how people give you feedback on that, because that part should decide how much you give away. Of course, you can't give away everything, so you have some data that we have, like kind of, is it common to give away 10% or 15%, 5% a year or so? We could always assist with data, but still, if you give away something and people don't get it, and you haven't been able to kind of communicate the expectation levels of what it can be worth, I think you may end up in giving away something that you think is great, while the receiver don't understand it, and you will end up in using something that should be great that potentially causes dissatisfaction. But to your question, I think it's the way of doing it is to look at expected gains in the future or growth, knowing the risk, but okay, this is okay to give away. And then you typically can measure that against like salary loss or other things, and seeing that, okay, you will get your money back if we get to this level. You will 10 double your money that you've kind of lost in salary reduction if we become like a 5% top performing company.
Okay, that's really interesting. But what is the middle ground here? Like, what in your experience, what is the average percentage that founders are willing to give to, say, first hires?
Yeah, to first hires, again, it depends a bit on how much you can pay in salary, because it's like if you're competitive on salary because you've already raised money, you can go a bit down on equity. But what we see is that early stage people in, if I should say a number, I would say about 5%. Because that's like it's based a bit on like kind of what we tried to aim to get the people that was first in after founders up to. But again, yeah, I think that sometimes you don't have money to give any salary, and then you have to go above. Sometimes you are pretty kind of on par on salary, and then you don't necessarily have to like give, because you need to save a bit for later stages as well, because you need to plan it a bit ahead. So yeah, but I'd say about 5% early. And then it's quite common to think annually we do between 5 and 15% as well. So you always do something going forward where you put some thing in the pool, and of course this depends on the investors that you get on board and how fast you're growing, but like this is to both retain new people coming in and making them a part of the equity journey, but also to ensure that you always are rewarding the ones that are contributing most to the company also going forward, and then keeping them retained and motivated also for the future. So we're a fan on something on hire for the earliest ones, and after that like annual processes with a nomination.
Okay, all right, that sounds fairly fair. Okay, so like you said, and it's great that you mentioned it, a lot of times people are very thrilled when they hear you get equity, but at a lot of times they also don't quite understand what it means and how they're going to be paid, right? So do you think that a certain education is still has to be in place, right? And is it also something that you're doing with Optio?
I think what you address here is one of the most important elements, because you give away quite a lot. If people understand it, you shouldn't give away anything. This is not because you want everything on your own, but it's because of that you could rather have given cash or something that they understand and they kind of feel a pleasure of getting in a way. So I think that it's two components. One thing is to communicate it in a good way the first time, basically saying, why are we doing this, making sure that you kind of understand and use it as a motivational element, either one-on-one, or if you do it like to a bigger group, you talk about it generally. I think regardless of software and stuff, you should talk about it to people. The next kind of component, I'd say that it's always good to make like a simple one-pager definitions. What is vesting? What is exercise? What is strike price? What is share? Just to kind of have it somewhere. I think that gives value, and you can include it in an email out. And so this is obviously things that we we deliver software. It also is in the software, but we see that it's for many quite good to have something, call it a bit more tangible than in the software, also as a PDF. And then the last component is that, of course, what we spend a lot of time on, and that is that you kind of have a software, you log in, you accept the agreement, everything is kept within the portal, so you can kind of see it. You can simulate what happens if we do a 5x, 2x, or it goes down. What will my value be, if any?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and see also what do you lose if you leave, and kind of make everything more tangible as you go. And when you get new awards later, you will kind of add that on and make it again as tangible as you can and as simple as you can by using a simulator in a way. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I think there is a term for it, radical transparency, right? When it's absolutely clear for every party, and I absolutely admire it. So how to make sure that we align the interests of shareholders and employees in a startup?
Also an interesting topic. I think that if you start off with this is also a bit case by case. If I start off with the odd cases, and then I'll move more on to what we see is most common.
Sure.
But sometimes you bring on like your 5th employee or your 10th employee is a salesperson that should kind of enter into, call it, Germany as a new market. Then it's okay to know that you could say, if this person has created 3 million annual recurring revenue for Germany within 3 years, you will get 5% of the company. That's one way, which is not necessarily the most common, but we think is extremely efficient if the goal or the target is very clear, very, very measurable, and not something that you will change so the company starts working in another direction, because that's a risk. If you do it like that, it's extremely it can be extremely powerful. This can be something you give to everyone because of your reduced churn, or you increase daily activity, or whatever goals. But then it's like, because that's the most strategical elements for the company, and it exceeds 1-year bonuses. This is something we look at in the longer time. And then you're onto the more kind of common ways of looking at it. And that's like, okay, shareholders, founders, they would like to create value, as easy as that. They would like the company value to go up. Of course, there's many factors that will kind of cause that, but still, ultimately, that's the goal. And then it's just to use employee stock options or RSUs or something which gives value to the people that creates the value at a point of time when you have served the service. Means that you have to stay on board for 3 years. If you do that, you will get shares for free. Or you could say, if you stay on board for 3 years and the share price increases, you can buy that share at the price it was when you started. So then you will kind of get your part of what you've been creating in a way. That, of course, aligns it very much with the shareholders, because of that you are one-on-one into creating shareholder value and remain in the company and to do your best. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's I think that's also very clear and an interesting approach. But one of your missions with Optio is also to remove whatever obstacles there are, legal or practical, right, to make it possible to offer equity-based compensations. So what are the common obstacles?
Very much jurisdiction-based as well. So, but if we start off there as well and thinking like, okay, you're a founder, you would like to start, you need to give away equity. And if you haven't done it before, you have no idea even where to start, right? Because it's like, you can't just write on a napkin and saying you will get shares, unfortunately, or luckily, depends on how you see it. But I think here it's about like, first of all, what we can do is to provide know-how so that people do good decisions, and that kind of picks what's best for them. The next steps is the legal formalities. You need the shareholders' approval, you need the board mandate. We kind of provide templates and everything that makes that so much easier. So you don't kind of do anything wrong or promises something in a napkin that later proves to be invalid, and then your employees are sad because of that napkin wasn't valid. So we'll assist in that process. And also another threshold, I'd say, is or obstacle is one, if you start off with doing it in Germany, an example, you have some challenges on a notary process. You can't just give away options there. So our goal here is to have that know-how, help and assist in saying, okay, you can do it like this, it takes some time, or you could do it like this, which is easier. And then assist in that. I'd say a third one, or on top of that, is also like, okay, let's say you have already a plan in Germany, but you're starting to employ developers in Poland or in Vietnam or wherever. You kind of start with cross-boundary challenges, and then it's about where we also can assist on what sort of complexities will that have, and how can we make something which is as good as possible all over the place. Very common, it's US, people from Europe expands to US, very relevant for many of our clients. Then they think about everyone do ISOs there. Should we do ISOs? That's like a pre-qualified tax plan. And then we can assist like, yes, maybe, but then you have to do it like this and this and this and this. And have you considered doing it like this? And this will be the consequences. And again, those questions and getting answers to those, it's not easy to find on Google, even though you try. And that's that part of our mission, that we would like to be someone where we have our software that we give you many answers. Where you don't have that, we have 55 people that can assist you with your questions, basically. Yeah.
Okay, well, and again, like I said, you're growing pretty rapidly, you know, from 5 to 55 in 4 years. That's pretty amazing. So let's get to it, right? What is your growth strategy? What has been helpful, and how did you find your first customers?
First customers we found, we have so far we are bootstrapped, so we haven't raised any money. Okay. And then how we found our first customers was very much based on dialogue with people in our contact network, and we kind of tested our hypothesis with them on, call it like PowerPoints, and then we kind of got it to prove the thoughts we had. Obviously, we had a lot of network from kind of the previous company we used to work with, so we had access to many great people and potential customers quite fast. So that was the first kind of talking to clients, finding it out, getting approval, and then obviously they became clients as well because they liked what they saw. We started like that, and we've been extremely customer driven, perhaps too much customer driven, but we have never developed anything that wasn't kind of 100% sure that our clients wanted. Yeah, we're still focusing on remaining that, even though we grow. Go to market and plans going forward is we want all companies in Europe that have X complexity on their share incentives to use us. There are solutions that may be even simpler if you're 2 employees, potentially. You can also do it in Excel, but we really want to be there when you really need us. So when you are at a stage where it's above X complexity, we want to be a no-brainer and obvious choice. Doesn't mean that we don't want the smaller companies to join us as well. But again, there it's sometimes like there are more alternatives there. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and going forward after that as well, one of our uniquenesses is how we do valuations and financial reporting. We do that better than everyone else. And that's something you need when you are listed. So that's not a public stuff, or at least before you kind of grow quite fast, especially when you're listed. And this may be something we also take to US and other countries, because we're already doing it in a lot of other countries from the setups we have today.
Right. So the big mission is to expand to other continents.
Yeah, I'd say that definitely, and we have some pivoting internally or kind of on our product register as well, but that's more on being even better at what we're already doing and some natural add-ons basically on it. Yeah.
That's great, and being bootstrapped is even more impressive. But could you provide a bit of an overview, like what would be the journey that a company would take with Optio with the equity incentive?
Just coming on, what would be the
equity incentive journey that a company would go through with you?
Yeah, so you can jump on this train a bit on where you are, but if I take it from the first or the starting point, it's like you are a bit curious on what can I do to retain and to motivate my employees. Already there, we would like to request or have someone visiting our webpage or contacting someone else, and then we could kind of explain and show and go through a bit of what we know. That would be the first part. And then the next step is like you will get all the necessary documentation through our system on what you need in order to get it approved and to get the award agreements and things that employees are getting signed. And we will also produce like this simple graphics to explain it. And then you will kind of have it approved, and then you will be on our system. Employees, if you're 3 or if you're 5,000, will get access to our system. They will log in, they can sign their agreements or select purchase amounts if you want them to buy shares, and then they can loan through our system. We have partners that could do that, and we can hold shares if it's a listed company. So from there on, we will do full administration and communication with all the employees and assisting everything. The user, or call it like the administrator, typically the CEO or the CFO or something, can log into our system and see the backend that have info on all employees and pull out information and reports and so on. So that's like very high level. And we can also assist when you come to exercising or selling and that sort of stuff. Then we have processes for that as well. So we say like from A to Z on equity incentives, basically.
Okay, that sounds like you've got some very robust software going on. So is it still your CTO, or you had to hire someone else? And who was your first hire?
The CTO is not still our CTO. He was very clear when he started that he was a startup person, and it's now a lot of GDPR and how do we kind of treat data privacy across all borders. So it's another resource. But our first hire was also someone we knew from before. We were quite clear on if we grow to this stage, we would like to approach this person to join, because then it's low risk, you know what you get, and obviously someone that we knew was a good match on stuff. So that was our first hire, and we were really happy with our first hire, and she's still working here as well. Yeah, and our chief operating officer today. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And I noticed that you said, you're driving people to your website to see what's going on, to see how it works. But when I was doing my research, I couldn't find a lot about you guys. I mean, something was in Norwegian, and obviously, I don't know it. But not too much information, right? Not too many interviews, not too many, there is no blog or anything. How do you do that? Is it word of mouth, or what's your strategy there?
Our strategy has been, I'd say potentially here as well, a bit different. It's like we have been very product oriented, very introvert if you compare us with kind of potential competitors and so, and based on our kind of growth and size now. So what we have done has been very much through relations, word of mouth. The auditors, Big Four, have recommended us, and we've kind of been growing based on users spreading the word and moving to other places and talking to others, which is great. We have no churn, people are really happy, and that sort of stuff. But I think that like 3 months from now, you will most likely, or hopefully, find a bit more info. So we hired our chief marketing officer a couple of, or actually less than a month ago, a new chief revenue officer to kind of also assist that. So we're seeing that we have a product that is good, we have clients that are great, we have a team that is great. Now we need to be more extrovert as well and show a bit more of what we're doing. We just revamped our webpage. The old one looked like arriving at the Death Star in Star Wars. It was not really great, but now we're kind of continuously improving it and focusing a lot more on it going forward.
Okay, that sounds exciting. Okay, so let's get back a little bit to what you're doing, right, with the startups and especially with the education, because like we mentioned earlier, it's a big problem. And like honestly, when I got to my first startup and was offered equity, I had to Google it, right? What is vesting? What is the cliff and everything? Is something I'm going to jump off when it all goes. But yeah, what do you do education-wise for the startups, or at least for the companies that are a little bit earlier in their journey?
Yeah, we have a bit of information we have written, again, not very visible, but we have started to produce a bit of written material and articles on like kind of how to start off with equity is one of the articles we have on our webpage now, but again, haven't marketed it, haven't kind of shown it anything around, but that's like one of the elements. What we have done is also attended a bit of these incubators and been talking a bit at the startup stages as well, just to kind of try to give a bit info on how do you do it, what are the most common instrument types, what are the common mistakes, how long vesting is common, and so all these questions we've kind of typically been discussing a bit, but also it's like we have a team of people that can help on talking with people on that as well. So if someone have questions, we can do it also on like a one-on-one base. But again, we are producing quite a lot of material nowadays to kind of spread a bit of the data we have and then try to share a bit more of it, because obviously with all the clients we have now, we do have quite a lot of data on what do they have, what worked, and what's the 90 percentile and what's the median on various stuff, etc.
Okay, and could you discuss maybe any notable success stories that happened with Optio helping other companies?
Yeah, I think we have quite a few of them, I'd say, and we shouldn't kind of take credits for their success at all, but we have a few companies that started off with equity very, very early and kind of expanded their team fast, and that we've seen that have done it really, really great, really exciting. And it's a Norwegian company called Easy. They do car chargers. They've grown like insane and been building a super, super cool company with a great culture and great people. It's like when we have been assisting them with these share purchase programs, which is basically when you can buy shares in the company and everyone's being invited. Right. We get questions on our chat support on like, can we buy more? We would like to loan, or you feel that it's like really such an intense feeling of wanting to own as much as possible of your company, basically. And when you get that, I really think that, again, this is a company that have grown from like 0 to 150 million euros revenue in, I think, 3 years or so. So obviously you get positive of that, but I think this is one of the many packages. If you kind of, as a part of the culture of like we're in it together, we help each other, we own it together, and seeing how their people write to us on the chat during that period, how all in and invested they are on owning more. I think it's at least a part of creating a culture that is very, very good, because you don't have only a couple of founders that should own everything. Of course, they have more than others, but they want to share. They want everyone to. That kind of creates the value to be a part of it. Yeah.
Right. So obviously that answers the question that we have on the cover today, right? Does it add to motivation in a startup? Right. So do you think early stage startups, even pre-revenue, pre-product, should have some kind of equity-based compensation in plan? Yeah,
of course. I would anyhow answer yes to it, but I think but really it's a bit on how we do things as well. It's like what I think the period when I think a startup or a growth company or a company in general is most efficient, motivated, super much all power on. It's when there's 3 founders sitting around a table, cross-functional, cross know-how, and just assisting and helping each other on everything, because everyone is so much in it together, like a rock band on tour. You just work. Of course, it's impossible to create that same feeling in a big organization, but still, I think you can take some of those elements. If you manage to share, if you manage to communicate in a good way, it's easier to create a team spirit where it's us together, not just 2 founders that own everything and everyone else. So I think that if you kind of believe that owning a bit of it is something that will make you sit up a bit longer, it's not that you don't get that angry if you get more without kind of getting extra paid for extra hours. You get a bit more of long-term super motivation, and if you manage to do it in the right way, I definitely think it's important to have it already from start.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. And obviously you get a lot of information, a lot of data about it. So what are the trends now? What do you see? What is the typical vesting period? What is the cliff? What are, again, the average percentage that early startups or maybe other businesses are willing to give to their employees?
Yeah, if we try to kind of just give, like, make it, of course there's like this variation here, but if I kind of were to say like a few simple things on it, I'd say that think about 15% of your shares as option pool, but think a bit ahead, kind of think a bit in the future, and try to think also that you should do a bit year on year, because you are growing. So already start off by thinking that. There's 2 instrument types that is most common. That's options, basically meaning that you will buy a share, or you can buy a share in the future at a price we set today. That's the most common one, and really great. The second most common one, I'd say, is in kind of at least pretty early stage companies, is RSUs. RSUs, it's the same as an option, but you pay no strike. It's a free share in the future, so you don't pay anything. I think if you have those 2 and evaluate which of those is the right for you in your case, where I just say that RSUs is best if you only think about retention, because you're not risking that the share price goes below the strike. So you will always have something you lose if you leave. So that's the best for retention. If you think a bit more about performance and aligning long term, I'd say options is best. So then you have like 15%, you have options and RSUs to think about. And then it's about like how long time you typically have to work until you get something. And then we see that I'd say minimum 3 years. It is quite many that have like annual over 3 years, but at early stage companies and so, you need to think like, when do we deliver value here? Don't make something less than people go off too early if you think that it takes this and this time. It doesn't really make any sense in my mind, knowing that there are someone that do it still. And then you can think like, okay, perhaps 3 years you have like the first vesting, and you can kind of do it like 50%, then 25% in 4 years and 25% in 5 years, just to make sure that you have a bit of long term in it. At least that's based on what we feel is the right way of doing it. The average, I think, is at 4 now, 3 years cliff average in a way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that's,
that sounds.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I see as well, because obviously we try to again analyze some data, what developers are getting, because we're hiring, and yeah, this is probably what I see as well. Okay, and one more question that I definitely wanted to ask you is, what do you think about, because we had a very interesting conversation the other day on a previous podcast with the founder of Outseta, and there they have this super cool, and after the podcast everyone got so excited and started contacting me about this, like they were offering the same amount of equity to everybody, all the founders, all the hires, but not at first, so you couldn't use it to attract somebody, right, to attract a talent. But once you're there and once you've worked a certain amount of time, you were given the same amount of equity as the founders. What do you think about that, and how easy is it to implement? And are people rightfully excited about this model?
I think it's interesting. I think it's because obviously it's always great to share and knowing that everyone has the same and kind of that feeling. If to kind of just touch upon some potential downsides of it, is that like the risk if it's too many people and you're kind of giving it out, is that it's potentially too diluted. And with that, I mean, let's say you're suddenly 1,000 of employees, right? And then it's like, do everyone contribute as much or equally to the value or not? Most likely not. And then the question is, would you then like to risk that because of that you're giving to also the 100 lowest performers the same amount, that the top 100 performers are not invested and motivated enough? So I'm not saying that I don't like it. I think it's super interesting, but I think it's important again here to analyze a bit what sort of people do you have and how motivated are they, and the consequences both in the front of the peloton and the back, because obviously the ones at the front are the ones that are pulling, and you need to be, I'd say, conscious on it, at least. Just to kind of add on that, I had a conversation earlier today about on a company as well that did, instead of doing pensions, like kind of putting away, you have something that is mandatory in many countries, but it's often very common to give a bit more than the mandatory. So instead of that, they're looking at giving away that extra amount in cash, transfer it over to shares with a vesting of X time. So the company kind of goes down in liquidity, but you spread it to everyone. So instead of giving, so it's something similar. You cut the costs a bit because you don't have to pay, let's say, 2-3% of the salary in pensions now, but you convert it into RSUs that turns into share in 4-year time. I think that's something similar, but you could look at it as both something where you save money today when it's a bit bumpy ride, the markets are a bit tough, and you put it on to like, if it goes well with the company, it's a huge upside and everyone gets to be a part of it. So it's something similar, but you use something and convert it into something else. I think the thought, but just to kind of, what I think here, it's again back to kind of the initial thought, you need to think, why do you do it? Because if you do it because that you want everyone to get the same, and you kind of that's really what you believe in as founders, do that. Because then it's important to share it with everyone and everyone should have the same. If you think that where we are and how we're competing, we need to super motivate the absolute key people, because if people take them, we're doomed. Then you need to put the efforts there. And it can be so different from a case to case. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And obviously, you know, I again, something I have to ask, are there any disadvantages to equity-based compensation?
I'd say absolutely yes, but I'd say there's more of pitfalls and obstacles if you don't do it the right way. So if I could start off like with a couple of examples there before, and I'll jump like kind of generally. I think what we see sometimes is that someone say you'll get shares worth 10,000 euros in 3-year time, then we convert it into shares in 3 years. So it's like a deferred cash bonus that converts into shares in 3 years. We set the amount now. Here we have seen, okay, what's your incentive on growing the share price over the next 3 years? Then nothing. You will get lower share amount, because obviously if the price goes up, you have your 10,000 euros and you convert that into, you'll get a lower amount of shares. So your best will be to keep the price low and then increase it, if you think isolated like that. And there are a few of these programs that we see that you lock that sort of stuff. One other one is, I give you shares today. I say, you're so important for me that you'll get shares worth 10,000 euros now, but they are restricted. You can't sell it and you need to work here. Otherwise, I'll take it back within 3 years. In most jurisdictions, you get taxed today, but you have nothing to cover the tax on. So I wanted to give something, but you ended up with a huge tax bill. And it's not really fun, because then it's hard for you to kind of cover it, and you most likely have to borrow money from your aunt or something. So that's just a couple of them, and there's more. Generally, on if it can be negative with equity incentives, I think here as well, yes, because of sometimes it's important that you you have people that need the money for paying their bills and so, and if you give this instead, or because often it's instead a bit, you kind of take a part of it, you end up with people being angry at that part because they rather wanted the cash. You can also have cases where people are taking a bit too much risk because of that. It's a buy. If it's your equity package can get worth a lot, but you have to get over certain thresholds, and then you push it a bit too hard, and especially in boardrooms and so, where you have no limited you have limited downside, but just an upside if it goes really well. But those are a bit of the odd cases. Generally, I believe that if you structure it the right way, it should not be. It's a bit hard to make it difficult if you communicate in a good way, or to make it kind of a negative outcome. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds amazing. So, what would be your best advice in the equity-based compensation kind of space to the first-time founders, or to the founders that are just thinking about this approach?
I think the best advice would be to not only take what the others are doing, think a bit, what do you want to achieve with it, and think a bit, try to align it a bit with your long-term plan of growth and how you see your strategy going forward. So just basically be conscious and to not just copy what you did last time or so, because it is a bit different on case by case.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think what you said is great. A lot to think about, definitely, a lot to learn, and it's great that you're doing this in an educational kind of way as well. So thank you so much for the talk. I guess everyone has something to think about after this, and I really, really hope that we can do it again sometime.
Lovely, and really great being here. Thank you for having me, and have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers.